"Get off my land. You don't belong here." That's what she screamed before calling the cops on me, before I'd even had a chance to finish unpacking. One minute, I'm savoring my first mug of coffee on the porch, breathing in that forest air, thinking maybe, just maybe, I made the right choice leaving the noise behind. The next minute, I'm getting sized up like a trespasser by the HOA queen next door. Even though my little cabin isn't even in her precious neighborhood. I get it now. Some people just can't stand the idea of not being in control. You ever met someone like that? Yeah, that happened. I'll give you a little background. My name's Eric, I'm 32, and for a living, I map land for the state. GIS specialist, if you want the official title. Basically, I know property boundaries better than most folks know their own backyard. All I wanted was a place to work in peace, away from the grind and the endless distractions. So, after months of scouring online listings and weekend drives through the countryside, I found the perfect spot, an old oak cabin, edges of a forest preserve, with more history in its floorboards than most neighborhoods see in a lifetime. Only problem? The self-declared sheriff of the HOA didn't seem to care that I'd done my homework, checked every boundary, every rule, every inch of that land to make sure I was in the clear. She'd made up her mind before she'd even met me. Let me back up a sec. Before I even moved in, I'd catch this silver SUV just idling at the intersection every few days. Same car, same time, just watching. I chalked it up to country boredom. Maybe someone curious about the new guy. But hindsight, as always, is 20/20ths. Turns out, the silent watcher was sizing me up for a battle I didn't even know I'd signed up for. The cabin, built in the 50s, stood on 3 generations of memories, solid oak beams, creaking floors that sounded like they were telling secrets every time I walked across them. Everything had been modernized just enough to make life easy. Internet, wiring, appliances, all good. I'd even brought in my own surveyor, made sure the lines were legit, double-checked by the state. Cross-referenced every GIS database I had access to. My lawyer signed off. My neighbors, well, most of them, were friendly enough. An elderly couple brought cookies, a wildlife photographer showed me pictures of local hawks. Even a retired park ranger stopped by to point out wildflowers in my yard. Then came Deborah Pierce, about 50, all sharp edges and expensive navy suits, hair fixed to perfection, carrying herself like she owned every inch of air in a room. I'll never forget the way she marched up my driveway that first Saturday, clipboard in hand, and asked if I had proper authorization to reside in the area. Not, "Welcome to the neighborhood." Not, "Can I help you find anything?" No, just pure, stone-cold interrogation. I tried to keep it light, showed her the maps, the surveyor's certificate, even pulled up the county zoning on my tablet. Instead of being satisfied, she started drilling me about my long-term plans, whether I understood the community standards, and how I was going to ensure I didn't ruin the ecosystem. Never mind that her own subdivision was built where the deer used to graze. The more I explained, the icier she got, until she finally stood up and, with this smile that looked like it hurt her face, said, "We'll see about that." She turned and walked back to her HOA gate, and I swear, the forest felt smaller for a second. I figured, fine, she'll see the paperwork, realize I'm not some threat, and let it go. I could not have been more wrong. By Monday, she was back, this time with a camera and a survey for the HOA. Files, snapping shots of my cabin like I was some invasive species. I pointed out, as politely as I could, that her HOA didn't have jurisdiction over my property. She just smiled that tight smile and told me environmental responsibility transcends property lines. You know what I mean? That's when the campaign started, photographing my boundaries, sending maintenance trucks to block my driveway. By accident. And before I knew it, a letter from the city accusing me of improper wastewater and illegal modifications. Stuff that wasn't even physically possible. Let me tell you, gathering paperwork to prove your innocence to government agencies is a special kind of nightmare, especially when you know it's all fabricated. But I had the records, the original surveys, septic reports, water quality tests, every shred of proof. Still, I lost hours, days, of work chasing down these phantom accusations. Then came the city planners, showing up unannounced, saying they'd had reports of possible violations, wanting to measure everything. asking if I planned any future development. And it was clear someone was feeding them a story, and that someone was Deborah. Twist of fate. While all this was happening, I started noticing little things in the digital survey files. Coordinates, markers, boundary lines, subtle shifts that didn't match the originals. It felt off, so I dug deeper. What I found? Someone who knew exactly what they were doing, had been altering GIS data, redrawing property lines to make it look like the HOA's reach extended right over my land. This wasn't just neighborly beef. This was digital fraud, plain and simple. And every fake map, every altered coordinate, traced back to a consulting company that, surprise, listed Deborah as a silent partner. This is where things got wild. Turns out, her real plan wasn't just to harass me off the land. She was running a scheme, expanding HOA boundaries to rake in dues, partnering with an energy company to push solar development for her own profit, and using shell companies to rubber stamp environmental reports. I found evidence of her manipulating county officials, bribing planners, all to set up this elaborate cash cow. And I wasn't the only target. 2 other families in the region had already been run off their land after months of the same kind of pressure. Now, you might think that's where the story ends. Me, outnumbered, outgunned, watching my dream get bulldozed. But what Deborah didn't count on was my background. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was the state guy who built these digital systems for a living. I had the original files, the backup logs, the whole paper trail. So, I started documenting timestamps, server access records, metadata from every altered file. And then I reached out to Marcus Chun, a retired engineer who'd been pushed out when all this started. He still had the old emails, the real boundary surveys, the receipts. We teamed up, built a case, and sent it straight to the Attorney General, state regulators, and the feds. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial trails, emails, shell companies. And the kicker, a side-by-side of the original and faked boundaries, clear as day. When the FBI called, asking if I'd testify, I knew we'd finally shifted the ground beneath her feet. The day of reckoning was pure cinema. Deborah walked into the county meeting all smiles and control, ready to pitch another expansion for environmental safety. She had no idea the panel was stacked with state and federal investigators. As I presented the maps, real on one side, fake on the other, her face went from smug to stunned. Then Agent Martinez read the charges: conspiracy, fraud, racketeering, and the marshal stepped in. Deborah and her crew, cuffed and silent. Her green empire? Gone just like that. Afterward, there was a ripple of awkwardness in the neighborhood. Sure, people not sure what to say, how to face me after months of believing rumors. But bit by bit, folks came around. Apologies, pies, a couple of brave souls even thanked me for fighting back. The county cleaned house. New rules, new transparency, and my old cabin now sits on land that's not just mine, but finally, truly protected. Even got promoted for my trouble. Turns out, fighting fraud has perks. Now, every morning, I step outside, coffee in hand, knowing the trees and I outlasted her little empire. And Deborah? Last I heard, she's got a lot of time to think. Staring at concrete and chain link, the queen of nothing. The funny thing is, I never wanted any of this, just peace and a little space to breathe. But maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes, the quiet ones are the hardest to move. So, what would you have done in my place? Ever tangled with someone who thinks the rules don't apply to them? Let me know below, because, trust me, every voice matters in stories like these.